I'm Paula Storm. Thanks for joining me today on my YouTube channel. Today I'm really excited to be launching the Slow and Steady Quilt Along, thanks to Free Spirit Fabrics and also Husqvarna Viking. Okay, let's get started on the Slow and Steady Quilt Along. Today we're going to be making my easy version of the Cathedral Windows block. First of all, we're going to need 4 3.5-inch squares for each block. So if you're doing the whole row, you'll need to cut out a total of 40 3.5-inch background fabric squares. But in my case, I'm just making the one block. So I'm just going to cut out 4 3.5-inch squares. So there's 2 down. And now we'll just grab the other 2. And there's my 4 squares. I'm just going to lay them out all right sides up so they're ready to sew into my piece. So there's those ones. Now I'm going to grab my other fabric. I decided to use this one because there's lots of different fussy cutting opportunities, and this block looks really good if you fussy cut it. So I could either fussy cut this turtle here, I could fussy cut this flower block here, or I could fussy cut this flower block here. So that's why I've chosen this block. The one thing to keep in mind though is that you are actually, if I was to cut out this turtle, you are actually going to lose the corners off this block. So basically it will look like a diamond by the time we've finished. So just keep in mind that you need to make sure that you center your piece really well. So I'm going to take this ruler, which is a 6.5-inch ruler, and you can see here I'm actually going to lose that corner if I fussy cut this turtle here. So I might move over and grab this one here. I'm going to center it really well, and I'm going to make sure I've got, there's about 1.75 inches from the tip of the turtle's nose here. So I'm going to make sure I've got about the same distance from the other edge, and I'm going to make sure that center line on the ruler is lined up right through the middle. And again, I'm checking there's about 1 inch distance on the outside of that fussy cut block. I'm going to cut out my 6.5-inch square. So that's what we need. We need 4 squares that are 3.5 inches, and we need 1 square that's 6.5 inches for this block. Now I've just done that without moving the ruler to make it easier for you to see, but I would suggest you spin that around and make sure you cut it nice and square. Okay, you can put the rest of that fabric aside because we will definitely use that later, even though there's a big hole cut out of the center. So here we have the 5 pieces that we need for this block. So we've got our 4 3.5-inch squares, and we've got our 1 6.5-inch. Okay, so the first thing we need to do for this block is we need to fold our decorative fabric in half. Now, you need to fold it with the wrong sides together. So make sure that you've got the pretty side facing out, and we're just going to fold it in half until it's really square or along those edges there. And see how I've got a folded edge and then I've got a raw edge over here. This is really important for this block. I like to flip it over so that the folded edge is away from me and the raw edges are closest to me. And then what we need to do is take one of our background squares, and we need to place the decorative fabric on top of that square. Now this is right side facing up, and we're going to pop it on top, making sure it's still really nice and square. And I'm going to line it up across this side edge here, because this is the edge that we're going to sew. So we'll pop it on, and what you'll notice is that you have an extra bit. I'm not sure if you can see it on the camera there. We've got an extra 1/4 inch at the top there where the folded edge is. So that's right. We want it to have that extra 1/4 inch there. And then what we're going to do is take another square of our background fabric and put it right sides down directly on top. Let me get rid of that bit there. We're going to put it directly on top of the coloured fabric. So what we end up with is a bit of a sandwich. We've got our first 3.5-inch square on the bottom, we've got our decorative fabric on top, and make sure it's lined up perfectly along that side edge, and then we've got another background square on top, sandwiching all of those layers together. And so what we have is an extra 1/4 inch off the top here where the folded edge is. That's really important. You must have the folded edge 1/4 inch down from your background fabric. Then what we can do is just pop a pin in if you like. I don't tend to pin all the time, but if you want them to stay nice and square, because there is quite a few layers there, make sure you just pop a pin in at either end so that you get a nice seam. And this is the edge that we're going to stitch across here, and we want to use a scant 1/4 inch, and we also want to reverse at this end. It doesn't matter so much down here, but you definitely need to reverse stitch at that top edge. So let's take it to the machine and we'll stitch that seam. So I'm just going to drop my foot down and make sure I'm really lined up well here, and I'm going to make sure my needle stops in the down position. Okay, so as I said, you don't really need to, but you can reverse stitch at the start, but you definitely need to reverse at the end. So I'm just going to pull this out nice and flat so I get a really nice 1/4 inch seam. Okay, so we've got that first seam done there. So we've got our beautiful 1/4 inch seam. We have the excess, the extra 1/4 inch at the top of the block there. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to flip both of those background pieces back out of the way. We don't want to get them caught in the next seam, so we just fold it over there. And I'm going to repeat that same process with the opposite end. I've got my right side facing up here with this block. I'm going to put my decorative fabric on top, making sure it's lined up along those two edges there. And then I'm going to take my other background fabric, flip it over so it's right sides down, pop it on top, and we're going to pin that seam as well. And we're going to do the exact same thing, sew that 1/4 inch seam down here. So what we have now is we've got the two background squares on either end, and we've got them pieced or joined down that edge. Then what we also have is the coloured piece in the middle, which is that 1/4 inch down from the top. And this is going to be the outside of the block, so that's really important. Now the other thing that I'm going to mention here is you don't want to press your fabric just yet. If you press it, you may not get it in the right direction and it will make it more difficult to piece later on. So make sure you don't press. But this is the only tricky bit for this block. So what I've done is I've turned it over so that the fold is towards me. And what I'm going to do is just fold that one back. So the top half, I'm going to leave the other half on the board here, and I'm just going to lift that up and pull it out. And can you see how I'm creating a triangle with that decorative fabric here? It's a bit hard to see. I'm going to lay down that background fabric and fold this up so you can see it a bit better. I'm pulling this out to get a triangle shape. Okay, so what I want to do now is I want to push this seam allowance one way or the other. It doesn't really matter. I'm going to push it to the right. And what I'm going to do with the bottom seam allowance is push it in the opposite direction so that we get a nice nesting seam there. So I'm going to lay those right on top of each other. Don't worry about the rest of it just yet. Just worry about that middle or the center seam allowance. And what I'm going to do there is pop a couple of pins in. I usually put one on either side of that join. So I'm pinning both seam allowances and holding them down nice and flat. So I've got both seam allowances nice and secure. Then what I do is I'll flip this top one back, and I'm just going to pull this out until it's about 1/4 inch from the edge here, because I want to do the same thing as before. I want a 1/4 inch on either side. So I'm just pulling it out, and you can see how this coloured fabric will fold and it will bend and it will be a bit awkward. That's okay as long as you don't have too much of this fabric up in here. We don't want to catch the rest of this in this seam across the top. So you just want to make sure you've only got the 2 layers of the coloured fabric here. And we pull it out, as I said, till it's about 1/4 inch from the edge, and we'll lay that top fabric back on top. So what you have now is you have your background fabric here, you have the 2 layers of the coloured fabric, and you have your top fabric on top. And we're just going to pin that together. And then what I'll do is I'll repeat that on the opposite end. So I'm going to pull this out, And it will want to sit a perfect 1/4 inch from the edge there. So just pull it out and lay that one on top again, lining up the 2 right sides together like that. So I'm just going to pop another pin in. And there we go. Now it will curl up. It doesn't want to lay flat because you've got all this bulk under here. So just give it a tug. Okay, so we're ready to sew. So we'll take that to the machine. Okay, and the trick here is we're just going to worry about this first section for now. And then I'm going to stitch along to the center. I'm going to make sure those 2 seam allowances are nice and flat. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to give this a gentle tug and flatten out this second half. By doing it that way, you'll get a really nice flat seam. Let's take that pin out and away we go. Okay, so this is what we have left. We've got our seam across the top there, and then all we do is pull it apart, and like magic, you've got that square in a square block. Okay, so on the back, we've got seam allowances that haven't been pressed. One of them's automatically going that way, another's going this way, and then you've got this center seam. If you want to, you can just unpick, there's a few little stitches here holding that first row together. You can just unpick those little stitches. Then what you'll be able to do is you'll be able to push one seam allowance one way and the other seam allowance the opposite way. But I just want to show you the block for now. So this is what we're left with. You can see we've got that beautiful turtle centered in the block, and see how you lose the corners here. So just be a little bit careful when you're fussy cutting. The next job is to give it a really good press, and if you want to, give it another starch. And then all we need to do is roll back that edge, and it will only want to go to a certain point. So roll it back, and then if you want to, you can just pop a pin in to hold it in place. And do the same thing with all of those 4 blocks, or 4 corners, I should say. And there's 2 different ways you can finish off this block. You can hand stitch it down, which I normally do, or you can machine stitch it. And so what I would do is just grab a matching thread and do a blind hem stitch all the way around the block, like that, to make it lay nice and flat. If you do it by hand, you can just stitch through just the top layer, just the coloured fabrics, and you're left with like a 3D block where you can pop your finger under. Whereas if you machine stitch it, obviously you'll go through all of the layers, so you'll have a block that's nice and flat. Okay, so now I'm over at the sewing machine and it's time to roll back those edges. So what I've done to start with is I've given my block a really good press so it's nice and flat. And then, as I said, you can roll it over and just pin it into place, but I prefer to just do it as I'm going, and I find that much more accurate. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to get that thread out of the way so you can see. I've popped my needle back in the center position so that I can follow the red line using my foot. What I like to do is I like to fold that fabric over at the corner, and then I'll drop my needle right down there to hold the fabric in place. Then what I'm going to do is do a fixed stitch, and what that does is it just goes up and down in the one spot so that I get more of a knot rather than a reverse, so I don't see those reverse stitches. Then what I'm going to do is just straighten it all up so I get a nice roll there on the block, and then I'm just going to stitch just inside the fold all the way around. So you can see I'm just inside that fold there, and I'm going to come up to the second corner. And I like to use a matching thread so it just all blends in. And I'm right at the corner now. I'm going to swing it around and I'm going to roll this next side over. And if you need to, lift your foot up to get it up out of the way. And then I'm just going to start stitching and grab that fold as I'm going. Just going to lift that up out of the way and poke that over so it rolls over nicely for me. And then there we go. I'm just going to make sure it's rolled over. And the last side, again, roll it over. If you need to, lift that foot up to get it out of the way. And then the foot kind of grabs it and holds it in place for you. And there we go. Once again, I'm going to do that fixed stitch. And then I'll cut my threads. And we're done. Okay, so there we go. That's our finished block. As I said, you could hand stitch this or you can machine stitch it, whichever suits you. And if you do machine stitch it, because you're going through all 3 layers, what you can do is come to the back and just snip away the excess fabric here so you get rid of all the bulk. And that can help when it comes to quilting. Personally, I don't worry, I just leave it in, but you can if you want to. So there you go, that's the block. We need a total of 10 of those, and once you've finished making your squares, join them into the row, pop it up on your design wall, and you're ready for next week. So thanks for joining me. I hope you've had fun making this row, and I hope to see you next fortnight with another block for our slow and steady quilt along. See you next fortnight.